10 helicopters lifted off in darkness over southern Lebanon, not carrying supplies, not carrying reinforcements. They were carrying dead and wounded Israeli soldiers away from a battlefield that the Israeli military immediately locked down with full censorship. No casualty numbers, no images, no operational details. Israeli media called it one of the deadliest single strikes on Israeli forces in the entire Lebanon campaign. And the American public, whose tax dollars are paying for this war, whose soldiers are being moved into position for its most dangerous phase, heard almost nothing about what happened that night. We can't bring you this coverage without your support. Help us stay independent. Link below. That silence is not an accident, it is a pattern. And right now, that pattern is covering something that should be front-page news across every outlet in America. Israel's Channel 12, one of the most widely watched news networks in the country, has reported that if the United States launches a ground operation against Iran, Israeli soldiers will not be going in. Not in a support role, not in a limited capacity, not at all. Let that land for a second. The United States entered this war on February 28, 2026, shoulder to shoulder with Israel. A coordinated surprise strike, a declared partnership, a shared military objective. 13 American service members are now dead. More than 300 have been injured. Gas prices across the country have risen by more than $1 per gallon. The Strait of Hormuz remains under pressure. Over 3,000 people have been killed across the conflict zone, 5 weeks in, and the partner that stood beside America at the start is now telling its own media it will sit out the next phase if American boots go into Iran. That is not a minor policy difference. That is a partner walking away from the bill after ordering the meal. Subscribe now for fast, clear updates as this story develops. To understand how this happened, you need to understand what is actually going on in Lebanon right now, because the battlefield reality there and the coming decision on Iran are the same story, just told from two different directions. Israel launched its ground campaign in southern Lebanon on March 16, 2026. The stated goal was straightforward: push Hezbollah north of the Litani River, establish a buffer zone, stop the rocket attacks on northern Israeli towns. For months, Israeli officials had been describing Hezbollah as a degraded force, command and control disrupted, leadership eliminated, capacity reduced. That is the official version. Here is the operational version. Approximately 400,000 Israeli troops have been mobilized for this campaign. As of this week, Israeli forces have not established control over a single frontline town. Ground advance routes in southern Lebanon have been described by observers in direct contact with the front as, and this is the phrase being used, a graveyard for tanks. A senior Israeli security official cited by Channel 12 expressed deep pessimism about the scale and frequency of simultaneous attacks from both Iran and Lebanon. The Hezbollah that was supposed to be neutralized coordinated its strikes from Lebanon to land at the exact moment Iranian missile waves were already saturating Israeli air defenses. That is not a broken militia scraping together what it has left. That is an organization that preserved its best units and waited for the moment its intervention would do maximum damage. Then came the helicopters, more than 10 of them, evacuating dead and wounded from the worst single strike of the Lebanon campaign, and within hours of the first reports, the Israeli military imposed total censorship. No numbers, no names, no footage. For Israeli audiences, at least fragments of the story got out before the censorship order landed. For the American public funding this war, it was as if the night never happened. While that was being buried, something else was being built. 2,500 United States Marines, trained specifically for amphibious landing operations, have arrived in the Middle East. President Trump told the Financial Times he was considering seizing Karg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal in the Persian Gulf. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said publicly that the U.S. military can achieve its objectives without ground troops inside Iran. The president has not ruled ground troops out. These two positions came from the same administration in the same week. A former Marine Corps officer and sitting congressman laid out exactly what happens if those Marines are ordered to move. They will execute the mission. These are professionals. They do not leave assignments unfinished. But within 15 to 30 days, they will need reinforcements and resupply at a scale that turns a pressure operation into a sustained military commitment. What gets announced as a limited strike becomes, through the simple logic of holding contested territory against a motivated enemy on its own coastline, something much longer and much larger than any press conference will say. The Hill published analysis this week calling a ground invasion of Iran a strategic catastrophe. The comparison to Iraq in 2003 is the obvious reference, but it undersells the problem. Iran has a population of 90 million people. It is 4 times the geographic size of Iraq. Its terrain, the Zagros Mountains, vast interior deserts, has swallowed invading armies throughout recorded history. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has spent 4 decades building a military doctrine designed for exactly this scenario. Pentagon war games have modeled this and arrived at the same answer every time. Hundreds of thousands of troops, years of occupation, casualties that would exceed the combined losses of every post-9/11 military engagement. And the country that was supposed to share that burden has said it is not coming. Israeli security expert Dr. Simon Sippis was direct about why. Israel, he said, lacks the troops and the equipment for a ground operation in Iran. This is not reluctance, this is exhaustion. Israel is currently fighting on 3 ground fronts: Gaza, Lebanon, the West Bank, and 2 aerial fronts, Iran and Yemen. The IDF is not a force sitting in reserve, it is a force in active contact across 5 simultaneous theaters, absorbing casualties in each one, including the casualties in Lebanon, serious enough to trigger immediate military censorship. Retired Brigadier General Israel Shafir put it plainly: the Israeli public is weary. A joint ground operation in Iran is not in Israel's interest. The American public is not far behind on the weariness. A Reuters Ipsos survey released last week found that only 7% of Americans support a ground invasion of Iran, not a slim majority against, not a close split, 7% in favor. That is near total rejection from the population that would pay the human cost of that operation. And this opposition is not coming only from the left. Republican Congressman Tim Burchett said there is no will for a ground conflict in Iran among lawmakers. Former Representative Matt Gaetz told the crowd at CPAC in Texas that a ground invasion will make America poorer and less safe, higher gas prices, higher food costs, and no guarantee that the operation eliminates more threats than it creates. A visible rift over the direction of this war opened at CPAC this week, not fringe dissent, a direct challenge to the operational logic being pursued. Democrats on the House Armed Services Committee requested a public hearing from Pentagon officials this week, saying classified briefings had not given them the oversight they needed. The people constitutionally positioned to know what is being planned are saying they do not have a complete picture at the exact moment when the most consequential decisions of this conflict are being made. On Sunday, March 29th, the foreign ministers of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt met in Islamabad without American or Israeli participation. Pakistan has emerged as the primary diplomatic intermediary in this conflict. Egypt's foreign minister described the goal as opening a channel for dialogue that does not require either party to publicly acknowledge direct contact because both are currently denying it. Iran's position on any ceasefire is clear and deliberate. Lebanon must be included. Any agreement that ends the Iran war while Israeli military operations in Lebanon continue is not acceptable. This condition is not a diplomatic miscalculation. It is a calculated trap designed to expose the gap between what Washington needs and what Israel needs by making any agreement contingent on resolving both at the same time. Washington needs a deal on Iran's nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz, enough to stabilize energy markets and claim a credible win at home. Israel needs to finish what it started in Lebanon before it can accept any ceasefire condition linked to that front. These objectives can coexist in theory. In practice, Iran has structured the terms so that they pull in opposite directions. Iran's parliament speaker said on Sunday that Iranian forces are waiting for American troops to set them on fire and punish their regional partners permanently. His framing is political. His identification of the 2,500 amphibious Marines now in theater is accurate. On Saturday, March 28th, the Houthis entered the conflict from Yemen, adding a 5th operational front to the pressure map. This is not a geographic expansion of the conflict. This is the Iranian strategic model activating exactly as designed. Not one military force defending one front. A network of actors, each with strategic depth in its own theater, each adding cost. Hezbollah synchronizing strikes with Iranian missile waves. Iraqi militia groups hitting American bases in Iraq and Syria. Now the Houthis adding pressure on Red Sea shipping. Iran does not need to win in any conventional military sense. Iran needs the cost of continuing this conflict to exceed the political capacity of Washington to keep absorbing it. Every new front adds to that cost, and the partner that was supposed to share the burden has said it is not joining the next phase. The costs are not abstract. gas prices are up more than $1 per gallon since the conflict began. Approximately 30% of global ammonia production, the fertilizer that underpins corn, wheat, rice, and soybean cultivation worldwide, is exposed to ongoing strikes on Gulf energy infrastructure. American farmers are making spring planting decisions right now against a supply disruption that will not resolve quickly. Supertanker daily rates have reached historic highs. Multiple major shipping companies have rerouted vessels out of the Gulf entirely. These costs are showing up in fuel budgets, grocery bills, and the economic margins of businesses and households that had no role in the decision to enter this conflict and have no mechanism to weigh in on whether it should continue or escalate. The 13 American service members confirmed killed in this conflict had families. The more than 300 injured will carry those injuries forward, and the official casualty figures represent the documented minimum, the floor, not the ceiling, of what is happening in an active conflict where military censorship was imposed within hours of reports describing the deadliest single strike of the Lebanon campaign. The former CENTCOM commander confirmed this week that the United States military has been working on plans for an Iran ground operation. That is not speculation. That is an institutional fact. The Marines in theater were not deployed to be withdrawn without being used. The president has not closed the door, and the only declared combat partner in this conflict has said its soldiers will not be walking through it. Here's the full picture. Israeli casualties in Lebanon are under military censorship. Congressional oversight of war planning is inadequate by the testimony of the committee members who are supposed to provide it. The official narrative describes a conflict moving toward diplomatic resolution. The operational reality shows 400,000 mobilized troops that have not taken a single frontline town, a Hezbollah that performed far above its officially described capacity, and one of the deadliest single strikes of the campaign followed immediately by total information suppression. The diplomatic track is real. Pakistan is facilitating. Regional foreign ministers are meeting. These signals are not nothing. But Iran has denied that any direct negotiations have taken place, has called the president's claims of ongoing talks deceitful, and has noted that previous diplomatic outreach was accompanied by continued strikes on Iranian territory. Rebuilding enough credibility for a framework agreement to hold while simultaneously deploying amphibious forces and discussing island seizure publicly is not a straightforward task. The question is not whether American forces are capable of executing a Karg island seizure or a broader ground operation in Iran. Capable forces can execute technically achievable operations. The question is whether the American people who would pay the human cost of that operation have been given an accurate picture of what is already happening in the theaters where cost is already being paid. Whether the partner whose security interest was the stated justification for this war will carry an equal share of what comes next, and whether the strategic objective that a ground phase in Iran would serve justifies what every independent analyst says it would actually produce. 10 helicopters flew in the dark because the story they carried could not survive the light. Your soldiers are being moved into position. Your money is paying for it. And the ally that started this alongside America just told its own media it will not be there when the hardest part begins. What happens to American soldiers when the partner that justified this war walks away from its most dangerous phase, and the public is the last to know? If this kind of independent, uncensored reporting matters to you, support the channel and help us keep this coverage free. Link below.